So good morning, students, teachers, and all science lovers. It's my pleasant duty to bid you all a genial welcome. I, Govind Lakhotia, Director of Bajaj Science Center, welcome all of you for this event. So on behalf of Bajaj Science Center, I welcome today's guest speaker, Dr. Pankaj Poddar, for this event. It's gratifying to look around and see so many familiar faces, including the motivated teachers, especially of NWUPT 2020 participants. Yes, we are going to have a merry and enjoyable time together. So before I introduce Dr. Poddar and I request Dr. Poddar to start this session, let me introduce Bajaj Science Center to all of you with the presentation. Yes, Bajaj Science Center is a place where kids are coming for performing the practicals. They are learning through experiments. They are learning by doing. This center was established way back in 2007 by a Pune physicist, C.K. Desai sir. And yes, the president of this institute is Shri Rahul Bajaj. So what is the need of Science Center? We cannot change the system, but yes, we can definitely change the system by this concept of Science Center. So this Science Center is not a museum where one can come and see and one can have a fun for no reason. So it's different from museum. It can excite you. It can find out the creativity in you, and definitely it will give you pleasure and happiness. And we are here to promote the scientific temperament amongst the kids going to the schools. So with this science center, we are nurturing 500 kids of Wardha district who are coming here for performing, for learning science through by performing experiments. We have 5 laboratories here: physics, astronomy, chemistry, biology, mathematics. Yes, mathematics also we have, electronics and computer science. So these are the just view of our different laboratories. We do have a very good collection of books. So we work with the different programs, and the special program which we run is the practical program, where the students from each and every school of this Wardha district are coming here for performing practical once a week. So the regular batches are there. They are coming after their school hours and they are performing practicals in all different laboratories. So in a year, they are expected to perform at least 40 to 50 experiments. By the time the student enters into 11th standard, he or she performs around 300 experiments. We do run a special batch for Olympiad programs also. There are different kinds of workshops which we conduct throughout the years, different science shows. And we do invite many scientific minds at the center. These are the views of different events at this place. Students from 5th standard to 10th standard are associated with this center. And this is a beautiful amphitheater which we have outside the center in the premises. We do conduct teachers training program also, where we invite all the great minds from our country. These are few achievements, like our students take interest in these exams and they crack these exams. Raghunath Mashalkar sir was here to inaugurate our center, this building in particular. C.K. Desai sir with Honorable President Pranab Mukherjee also visited this place. Every year, Jamnalal Bajaj Awardee visit this place. We are not that active on social media platforms, but from today, we started this platform, which will be open for each and every curious minds of this country. And yes, to start with, we are starting with Weekend Science Stories, and where we have invited Dr. Pankaj Poddar from Pune. So it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Poddar in front of you.
Hi.
Just a minute, sir. I will take you on spotlight. Though Dr. Poddar is very much familiar to the scientific world, but I feel my privilege to introduce Dr. Poddar in front of you. Dr. Poddar did his master's from University of Rajasthan in 1995 in physics. Then he did his doctoral studies from JNU and he got his PhD in the year 2000. Then he was the postdoctoral fellow in Florida and Israel for 5 years. In 2005, he joined National Chemical Laboratory, Pune, as a scientist. Now he is serving as a senior scientist there, and with more than 5,000 citations for his renowned publications and many awards. His areas of expertise are biosynthesis, material chemistry, nanoparticles for biomolecules, nanotechnology, soft condensed matter physics. He is the recipient of CSIR Young Scientist Award in the year 2008. He is also the recipient of MRS medal. So on behalf of Bajaj Science Center team, we deeply appreciate your passion, devotion for building scientific temperament amongst the kids. And I request Dr. Poddar to kindly start this.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Govinda Lakotia. And it was really a pleasure to know first time about this prestigious center, Jamnalal Bajaj, Center for Science in Wardha. And many of the facts I was not aware actually. And thanks for introducing your center as well. And I feel also privileged that I'm speaking to students, hundreds of students, hundreds of young minds, and who are waiting for, waiting with a lot of questions, a lot of curiosity, and probably they need to get a little bit provoked in their mind, little bit basically questions should be raised in their mind so they can start looking at the world around them the way it is, to develop, when you develop a vision to look at the nature around you in a right manner, then naturally you are connected with science. Okay, so first connection with science starts with actually nature. So today I'll be speaking on who are we and how we study the matter, the story of us as human, the story of our mind, and story of matter, and what basically physics and neuroscience tells us advances in these two areas about the merger of mind and matter. And that has been the subject of human curiosity when this conscious brain developed. So if I start this journey, so I'll share the slides. So let me introduce first what we do in National Chemical Laboratory. I think you must visit also our national lab. So this will also excite a lot of scientific temperament among you. So we work in various divisions. Various scientists are focused in variety of areas. So our laboratory is focused is basically, you might be hearing about a lot of drug development, modern drug development, India's independence to on the drugs, pharmaceuticals. So we have a lot of drug development program. We have a lot of advanced materials development program, including polymers and inorganic materials, catalysts for your automobiles, and whatnot. A lot of organic materials, petrochemicals, and in fact, from the laboratory scales to the pilot plant. So in the COVID area, our scientists, including my group, they are accepting a lot of challenges. We are coming out with a lot of products. Right now, we are also collaborating with Tata's to come out with some product which it can be like a spray can, and you spray on different surfaces. And suppose some presence is there of this coronavirus, so it can be identified in a simpler way. So of course, there is a very complex science associated with that. But I thought, why not I make certain things simplified? So we are living in a difficult times, as you know that, and understanding the mind has become increasingly important. So I thought, let me start with explaining you about the mind. Then only we can come to the stories of matter. So if we have a finer control over our mind, finest mind can understand the matter in the finest way, believe me. So over the period of time, we have been ignoring the first part, understanding the mind, and then we directly jump to the matter, and then the problem creates. And our advances in our physics, when we go to the quantum physics, when we go to the neuroscience level, then we start understanding our senses how the senses can mislead us, and everything is illusion, the sense of color, sense of smell, sense of vision, sense of directions. This is all our human illusion, and probably we created this for convenience. The idea of skin color and all these things are basically person's height, and all those things are basically nothing but these are all illusions, actually, mental illusions, actually. Okay, so let me start. So where do we start? Actually, we start our story. So I'll speak about first story. So our story starts from obviously the creation of our universe. Actually, you know about Big Bang theories. There are some theories which are existing. Probably these theories might change, might get modified slightly or more. But right now we know that our universe was initially, the planets started from preliminary particles, basically, and then there a lot of condensation happened, and then our planets were formed, and over a period of time, these planets basically cooled down. And then I'm basically fast forwarding the story so that I can come to the mind. So when this planet cooled down and our Earth, so then there were physical conditions which were appropriate for the lives to start. So first, the physics has to be right, the right kind of a temperature, right kind of humidity, right kind of pressure, so right kind of gases. So all these things was required. So it is not, it is really mind-boggling if you think that out of millions of planets, only Earth is known to have so far the life, actually. Obviously, there may be some primitive life on Mars and other planets, but such an evolved life, how was it possible, actually? Okay, so probably right amount of physics actually started, and started the chemistry, starting from the amino acids and then proteins, and then simpler unicellular structures, and then multicellular structure, and then finally started from the circle of life, actually. So one should take a pause and ask some questions, actually, that I will give you one question here as an exercise, and please note it down, and probably you have to answer it back to Professor Lakhotia, that what is so unique in the planet Earth? Why do we have this planet? What is the role of molten iron in the core of the Earth, which is keeping us alive? So what is the role of magnetic field, and why the iron is in the core of the Earth is still in the molten form? Why is it in the molten form, actually? And what is its link that we are all there? There is a lot of iron on Mars also, but there is no life there. So what is so unique physics? It is actually, I can tell you some hints that it is connected to some nuclear reactions and other things. So idea is that basically that the first lesson of the day starts that we should pay gratitude to what we have. It's called ecological intelligence. You might have heard about emotional intelligence, social intelligence, and ecological intelligence. These three intelligence basically are highly required to make you successful in your career. So I'll keep throwing some hints to how to, be successful in your career, how to find, find balance. So once you wake up, you should pay attention to the planet. Why do you exist here? The role of rivers, role of the oceans, and role of the mountains, role of the trees, role of the birds, role of entire symbiosis between basically different life forms and non. So that's what basically our rishis told us to first to pay gratitude when you wake up. So once you pay gratitude, then this balance of ecological intelligence, that ecological it basically develops, because we have lost this ecological balance. Actually, that's really, you can make a wonderful career, but if you are destroying this planet, so no, you are going to have serious amount of problem. So this thought process must start in the students from the lost culture of praying gratitude in the morning, okay, to our rivers and to the oceans, to our rishis who gave us the knowledge, and the trees, air, and all kinds of life-giving, life-sustaining things. Okay, then basically you don't take those things for granted. You should pay gratitude to the food which is served in your plate, air you breathe, clean water which you get, people who are working for you. Now let us move to the next place. So basically, the story of our human mind, actually. So some of you know that humans evolved from fishes, and you can see the brain size here. Brain size is displayed as this this with color, and you can see that when the evolution started, then you can see the brain has started growing in size. Amphibians and reptiles and birds and mammals, and then finally human. Our brain size there is a significant difference in our brain size, brain function. It is more complex. So now question comes basically that how do we understand our brain so that we can understand the matter, because that is the finest probing mechanism, our brain. So it has to be really understood in a very simple language so that we can really use this in optimized, so brain hygiene, removing the baggage from the brain, not just from the body. That has become essential part today. You can see a lot of suicides happening, and a lot of people going to drugs, a lot of bullying happening in the schools, colleges, a lot of basically shaming and body shaming, and all kinds of things are happening all over the world. So if once we understand the brain, then these things we understand very well, and we will not run into these problems. What I just mentioned. So first we have to understand what we lost when we jumped from mammalians, for example, dogs, cats, and all these mammalians, and then we basically jumped to the humans. So that was invention of fire. Sometimes basically the fire, initially what happened that humans, when they used to live in the caves and jungles, and basically they used to eat uncooked food, raw meat, or all kinds of roots and vegetables and fruits, lots of amount. So their calorie requirement was, and they used to travel a lot to search the food actually during the evolution, and that required a lot of calories, but the calorie intake was too low, because a lot of calories were utilized to digest that raw food, because so finally very less amount of calories reached to the brain, okay, upper floor of our body. So when humans started controlling the fire, then suddenly the food was available in pre-digested form. So basically you can understand that some root is eating raw, and then eating it into the cooked form. So then high amount of calories started reaching to the brain, and that was the burst of new pathways into the brain. It was like a burst of neurons. And then this concept of consciousness came, that who am I, what I'm doing here, where did I come from, and where I'm going, who are these other people. So what is this planet? What is this fire? What is this earthquake? And what is all kinds of wondrous moments came into the human life, that what I'm doing here, who am I actually? That question was, who am I actually? What I'm doing here? So that happened actually in Homo sapiens sometimes. And then this thought process started actually, that so then that led to a lot of interesting basically discoveries, which I will mention just in a moment. But it came with the problems. If you see that animal brain is hardwired to do certain tasks, and they live very happily. They don't overeat, they don't oversleep, they don't do anything in, over again. They don't indulge into the sense pleasure overly. They don't have depression, they don't have anxiety, they don't commit suicide. Okay, rarely actually. So there may be some geographical events. So, but so what is the problem? So human brain gave us a lot of opportunities, but there was a lot of drawbacks. So for everything, there are drawbacks and opportunities. So once we understand the drawbacks first, then we can control them, and then we have lots of opportunities. Otherwise, there is a problem of trapping. So let me tell you that there are three parts, and every part is very different. So first, I already gave you about the planet Earth. Please don't forget, exercise number is already given, and about the Earth iron core. And second exercise I'm going to give you now, which is related to brain. And so we have three parts of the brain. During the evolution, we evolved from the reptilian brain, and then the mammalian brain, and then neocortex. So the top part is basically neocortex actually, and then this is a prefrontal cortex. This is basically thinking brain, or wisdom brain, brain with the wisdom, learning capacity, linguistic capacity, and intellect, whatever you call it. That is basically the human brain, and that is the problem source also. And that's where a lot of efforts is going on, that who am I, that question came in this part of the brain. And so basically this brain gives us a lot of flexibility also. So there is a lot of research about elasticity of the brain. So this brain basically thought processes is it's not like a logical brain. So let me tell you that many people say that our brain is logical. It is much more than logical. Logical brain is a very primitive brain. Logical brain means you can mathematically you can create a mathematical function. Logic means, logic circuit, logic gate, and all, you write a computer program that 1 plus 1 is always equal to 2. Brain is much beyond that. It is elastic, so it can be stretched in any direction, any dimension. You can execute any task. You might have seen the movie Matrix, right? So it is neuroelastic, and some part of it is plastic. So for example, you start riding bicycle, and once you initially you fall, and then after certain times you are singing, and some people dance on the bicycle and they are still going happily. So that goes into the plastic form. You mold the brains. Okay, so basically when you do the schooling, basically you are programming your neuroplastic region of the brain. But important part is basically neuroelasticity, that at any time of the career you can learn new skill immediately. That is elasticity, like elastic band. So it's not just plasticity, it is elasticity also, which is highly important actually. So logical brain is a very primitive function of the brain, which computers can also do that, right? When computers can calculate, that is logic. So that was a wrong notion which came from Aristotle. Aristotle actually confused several generations, thousands of years, that brain is a logical brain, rational brain. Brain has to be irrational, brain has to be logical. That actually is a creative brain. So please remember, students, creative brain can be when the brain is logical thinking. When you come out of the logic, then you create certain new science, you create some new arts. So logical brain doesn't create anything. It just does some certain function. Okay, so that myth has to be broken. So that was given by Aristotle wrongly, and that got percolated, and everybody is singing that tune, logical. Okay, that is very old theory. So new theory suggests that, and yoga system, it is nothing like logical brain. Our Indian system never said that logical brain is important. We never say it like that. So it was Aristotle, Greek, and theory. So the reptilian brain. So you have to. The second exercise is basically you have to find some function from your day-to-day life. You have to carry out one experiment uh, that you can realize that you have this reptilian brain. Okay, I give you one exercise. When suppose, I mean, it's basically you take a paper ball, and when your brother or sister is not watching, you throw on them, so they will be completely, they will try to protect them, right? They will just jump somewhere and, oh, some threat is there. So which part of this brain is helping you to protect? Actually, that is basically reptilian brain that survives you. For example, you're traveling in a car, and somebody throws water on you, some shower is there. Immediately you basically, you are protected. There is a front glass, but still you basically jump. Okay, okay, yeah, then you try to protect, and then you laugh at yourself. Oh, how fool I am, मैं कितना बेवकूफ हूँ, देखो मैं तो कार में बैठा हूँ, आसपास शीशे हैं, तो भी मेरे ऊपर तो पानी आएगा नहीं, तो तब भी मैं उछल रहा हूँ. So basically that is the shortest pathway in the, if you see this, this is the stem of your brain that goes to the spinal cord, and then the fastest signaling happens to your reptile brain. So it is very important part of the brain that helps to survive, take quick decisions. You might have seen many times mothers, they do unthinkable tasks, to save their kids. So which part of, they don't have time to think. So this thinking brain is slowest part. Actually, it takes time. So this neocortex should be as slow as possible. Then you can analyze much better. It should not be fast. Brain should not be fast. Brain should be because it requires time. It cannot be fast. Reptilian brains are fast. Mammalian brains are fast. They react fast. Somebody says something and then you get angry and something. That is a mammalian brain. Immediately people start reacting to the teachers, and then they react to their parents. That is the mammalian part. When you go into the reactionary mode without thinking, that means your animal brain is kicking in. I mean, we are giving bad names to animals. Animals don't do like that most of the time. But so you have to basically understand the finest control when the neocortex is functioning. So basically, this is the second exercise, that you have to find examples from your day-to-day life, some practical examples. You have to write which you feel that when you're in which activities your neocortex is working dominantly, in which activities your mammalian brains work dominantly, and which activities your reptilian brain basically acts efficiently. So now let me end this, and let me tell you. So the next topics for next 5 minutes is basically, I would like to address you. So once we started understanding, our rishis basically started understanding, yes, this has got a problem. So how do we find solutions? Actually, let me tell you that as humans, our entire decision making, our success, our health, our height, what we are, is decided by 3 factors. Genetics is not in our control. Epigenetics is basically you study in Bajaj school, science center, and then you have nice teachers, nice environment. That is epigenetics. Actually, that is not in your control. Many things, the air you breathe, whether it is clean air or polluted air. So epigenetics is basically environment control. So that is 1/3 which decides you, and last third is basically your self-control. So people already wrote manual. Almost 2,800 years back, and that manual I brought this morning. So this is the manual, Patanjali Yoga Sutra, and I thought I'll share only 2-3 things from you that will help you. And this is the third exercise, that you have to find applications out of those 2-3 lessons. So Vivekananda says that mind is like a lake, okay, and so these thoughts are like different kinds of thoughts, basically anger and anxiety, depression, and all kinds of jealousy, and they're all like waves in the mind. So when you try to understand the matter, when you try to understand physics, when you try to understand chemistry, so if there are waves in the so mind has to be like a mirror, actually. So so he says that okay, if you have waves in your mind, if your mind is turbulent, how can you see the world around you? Okay, a turbulent mind will get a muddy reflection. So turbulent mind, basically the mud will come from the bottom, and then it's all muddy grayish water, And then how that Vivekananda actually said in his book Raja Yoga, you must read that book actually, Raja Yoga. It's a small book, very thin book actually, and it is highly popular. It became highly popular actually. So I request all the students must read, at least 1 or 2 chapters out of that. And that book actually is written based on this book. Vivekananda read this book and then he wrote that book in a simpler way. This is a very complicated book. But then Vivekananda and Patanjali, they said that, okay, there are 8 rules actually that first is, there are 8 ladders. So you go step by step. So once they understood mind, then they give some guidelines that how can you understand this animal brain, reptile brain. So there are 8 rules: yama, niyam, okay, asana, pranayam, pratyahar, dharana, dhyan, and samadhi. So I'll not go to these all these stages, but I'll tell you only about and you have to find the application. You have to apply, and then you have to see whether it applies or not. Actually, I'll just mention 5 yamas. Actually, one is ahimsa. Ahimsa, basically in school, you should not basically bully your fellows who might be of a different skin color, a different height, because it's all genetic issues. You should go beyond that. Ahimsa is basically in mind as well as in the verbal actually. Okay, ahimsa is most important actually. If you do ahimsa, if you do hinsa, then it will fire back on you. You will not be, you will go into depression. Please note that it's good for you if you do the ahimsa, okay, not if you avoid violence actually, okay, in school, colleges. Satya, be balanced and be truthful. If you are truthful, then you will be free from depression, anxiety. Otherwise, if you are not truthful to your teachers, to your gurus, acharyas, then you will always have, oh, I have spoken something else to this person, something, that's a root cause of anxiety and depression actually, because you are not truthful actually. Asateya, basically what is not belonging to you, you should not try to grab it actually. Brahmacharya basically sense control. You should have moderation in your what you eat, what you basically. It's basically charya is basically routine. Brahma is basically the supreme being actually. So you have to live life like a supreme being. Your life should have a reflection. And aparigraha is coming as a fashion these days in US. It is basically that. What we call it actually minimalist actually. So minimalism basically you try to live life with fewer things actually. If you can live that, you don't have anxiety, you don't worry actually. Worries. Okay, I can live anywhere, I can wear any 3 pairs of clothes, I am fine. I don't need to show off. If you want to show off new mobile, new thing, gadgets, then obviously you will go into depression. If you have a checklist, people make this long list of to-do list. I have to go there, I have to do this, I have to achieve this, I have to eat in this restaurant, and I have to do this. That is the main cause of depression. You can't fulfill, you have new desires. So basically these are called, in science language, it's called dopamine fixer. Okay, so it's basically pleasure reward points. So basically when you eat something, when you do so there are basically, these are hormones. So pleasure is fleeting. So for example, you watch a movie, after a certain time you don't remember, you eat popcorn or something nice environment, after that you forget. So it's a basically sudden surge in some pleasure chemicals, and after that they die down, and next time you need higher amount of pleasure, then it dies down, and then it's like an addiction of pleasure, like eating sweets. It's like a drugs or something. So these are all they basically control our mind waves, as Vivekananda says, that we should not let those chemicals control our mind waves. Chemicals can be sugar, or it can be nice movie or nice this thing. It's the cause of the problem, because you are busy in all that thing only. You can't investigate matter. You don't have time because you are busy with all your checklist and 50 checklist. This actor had 50 checklist. I have to do this, I have to go there, I have to go to that holiday. So please, that is the problem. That is the source of problem, and you waste a lot of time. And last thing I would like to tell you about mind is 5 niyamas actually. If you follow, first is socha, basically mental hygiene, physical hygiene. Socha is basically cleaning, not just removing the fat on the body, but a lot of mental accumulation, and that is very important. And santosha, basically you are content, you don't need much from life, as I said, otherwise you will go into depression. There is a mismatch between what you desire and what you can get. Okay. And Swadhyaya, you do the self-study. You always try to introspect actually, and then you do some reading of Vivekananda's book or something, you always do that. And finally, Ishwar Pranidhan. What is the application of Ishwar Pranidhan, even if you don't believe in Ishwar? Okay, I have done my best. I've done best in the exam, and I want to sleep nice, tight. Actually, God will take care of that. So this is basically psychological way of going out of anxiety, depression. I mean, मैंने कुछ सब अपना अच्छा कर दिया. मैंने यम का पालन किया है, नियम का पालन किया है. मैंने बढ़िया तरीके से, मैंने कोई गलती नहीं करी है. Now I let me sleep. कल एग्जाम का रिजल्ट आएगा, देखा जाएगा. So then you don't really go into those psychological problems. And how to get maximum output. You have to avoid digital distractions. You don't become a digital slave. Okay, our time we never had these digital distractions, but now people are becoming the slaves of these digital world. So that is really alarming situation actually. So I will go to the next story. The story is basically when you have a control in your mind, and okay, then humans, when Sage Patanjali gave this treatise sutras, that okay, now I have calmed down my mental waves. Now I can investigate matter. So then they started looking at the matter. What is this stone made of, and all those things. Then this question came basically that whether the matter is divisible or indivisible. Okay, how long you can keep on dividing? The concept of atom, Parmanu, actually came long back by Kanad Rishi. Basically, it was given by Kanad Rishi. The problem was that neither physicists knew Sanskrit, and Sanskrit scholar didn't know physics. There's a lot of research in US and the UK now on this Kanad Rishi's text. And he has written laws of motion back then, and then he gave basically theory of so this is the third exercise for you, that you have to read on Google about Rishi Kanad's contribution in physics. He is considered one of the first physicists in the world actually, who basically gave theory of atoms, not the atom what we know in the modern science, but basically like indivisible entity, that okay, this is the foundation, there's like a building block of this is the ultimate building block. I mean, now we know that there is nothing ultimate building block. These are all waves. We know the quantum words, but at least they tried their best to understand the world, having controlled their own mind. That they started investigating actually, and then they had their own concept of time, and then they had their own concept of basically weight, and they had their own concept of basically atoms, basically length scale actually. So they could think down to 70 nanometer. It turns out, what were they doing, those ancient people with 70 nanometer? It is of anybody's guess. But if you want to, I think many senior people are also listening to this lecture. So I will encourage you to read for senior people the books by Professor Michel Danino. He's a French electrical engineer, and he has done a lot of research. Okay, so let us see that how this. I will take you through some story that how we started seeing atoms. I'm sure that all of you want to know this story. That हम लोग एटम्स देखने पर कब आए, हमें कैसे मालूम पड़ा कि ये एटम ऐसे दिखते हैं. ये बहुत लंबी स्टोरी रही है, करीब 700-800 साल की एक जर्नी रही है, और मैं आपको इस जर्नी को में लेके जाऊंगा बहुत सिंपल तरीके से. और फिर उसके बाद में हम लोग कुछ बेसिक साइंस डिस्कस करेंगे, कुछ आपको एक्सरसाइज दी जाएंगी. Then we will close it. Okay, I may a little bit take more time actually, if you don't mind, 10 minutes, but I'm sure you will enjoy this journey. Okay, so let us go back more than 1,000 years. So that was the first time that reading stone was developed. I mean, glass is very common in nature. Glass. Glass can be found actually very molten amorphous material which you can see through. So humans basically realize that if you look at, you can see from your own experience, if you put a water drop somewhere on the paper or somewhere, you can see that basically you can see the fonts magnified. Okay, water. Suppose you have a water drop on a leaf. Okay, early morning dew drop, and then you look at the leaf through the water drop, you will see that the resolution is better. You will be able to see slightly finer features of the leaf. You do this experiment in the rainy season. Now there is a rainy season. In the morning, some drops you find and some sun rays are coming. So you try to see, and so that was the first human effort to start looking beyond what eyes can see actually. So they realized, okay, yes, I can make a glass, and then suddenly, by next 200 years, 300 years, people started wearing the glasses like the way it is, not as sophisticated as this is. There is a lot of physics involved here, a lot of coating, a lot of polymer science. This is very sophisticated device. Believe me, a lot of science goes into that. We have done a lot of projects on this actually, how to make these efficient eyewears. Okay, but then they started wearing those stones, polished. I can call it a stone actually, because they were more or less like a stone. They were found in nature, and then obviously, then glass making came to Europe, and then they started making more sophisticated things. You can call them basically predecessors of modern day microscopes and telescopes. Okay, so then scientists, you can call them now scientists actually. Obviously the rishis were also scientists, but the modern day scientists actually. Okay, so when you put those lenses together, those glasses together, so then you can put them in certain order, then you can make different kinds of microscope as well as telescope actually. So then came the time of Galileo, Robert Hooke, and Anton van Leeuwenhoek. Actually, these three people came in 17th century, and then Galileo is credited to develop fairly advanced compound microscope with the combination of convex and concave lenses. So you know that Galileo is quite famous for his work. And Robert Hooke, I'm these days teaching, and Robert Hooke came to my mind almost every now and then. Basically, he used that. He was the first person who spent a lot of time in nature, looking at the biological objects, even being a physicist. And he carried around his microscope, and he started. So he gave this first concept of the cells actually, and the Hooke's law actually, another thing. So he wrote a book of collection of his diagrams of microscopic world. Now we can use this term microscopic world. Okay. Now we have some vision aided by these tools, external tools, that we can go from the resolution of eye, which is I think around 0.2 millimeter, right? Resolution of eye is around 0.2 millimeter, 200 micron, that scale. So then finally more and more sophistication happened, and then came 18th century, and Joseph Lister, he modified it further. And I would like to mention here one great scientist, Ernest Abbe, German scientist. I think you have heard about the name Carl Zeiss. So Carl Zeiss was basically money bag actually, and then he was a brain and mind and matter. So they founded a company first time to start selling a commercial microscope, and they realized that there is an aberration. You might have read, or you may read in your science books about spherical aberration and chromatic aberration. But that's the reason we can't see that well from microscopes. So they basically try to reduce the chromatic aberrations. See, finally, what we want to do, we want to be able to see the atoms. So that's a journey, that's a story, how humans went from developing a conscious mind to start seeing the atoms. So that is basically the end of the today's journey. So I'm halfway into that, and it's a very interesting journey actually. So obviously I will skip this slide because it's Ernest Abbe. I said that his name is very important because he gave one mathematical formula, and you can write down this thing. I will give you one very simplified only formula. I will not give you a complicated one, but it will solve your day-to-day calculation. And you have to do some calculation and give it to Professor Lakhotia. That is your next assignment, next exercise. So I will tell you that resolving power of a microscope is wavelength divided by 2, lambda divided by 2. Now you have to tell Professor Lakhotia what is the, now you have to, first you have to know what is the visible spectrum, okay, Vibgyor, right, from violet to red, and then you have to take 3 colors and know their wavelength, okay, number in nanometer or angstrom unit. You can take units nanometer or angstrom. 3 colors, you can choose any color, okay, no problem. And then you have to give submit if you use that light, what will be the wavelength, what will be the resolution actually of microscope. Suppose you use only green light, suppose you use only red light, what will be the resolution limit, okay. That the formula is D is equal to lambda by 2, okay. So that is a formula that will tell you exactly how small you can see, and you will be surprised that using visible radiation, you cannot see basically less than a quarter of micron, okay, quarter of a micron actually. See, for example, this COVID virus is basically 1/10, around 1/10 of micron, 1/10 of the micron. So with this tool, you cannot still see coronavirus, okay? You cannot see, okay? So how will you able to solve this virus problem if you are not able to see see the virus? So now you understand the problem, okay? So you can see the cells, you can see the blood cells, blood cell size can be seen with this microscope. So people started seeing that white blood cell, red blood cell, and microbes you can see, okay? But viruses you cannot see with this microscope. Obviously, if you cannot see the microscope, then diseases remain like a, act of God and something like that, or something mysterious has happened. And I will skip all these things. And then something special happened in 1932. Now we are in 20th century. That is called phase contrast microscope. And Professor Jernicke, he got Nobel Prize in physics in 1953. And biologists were interested in those microscopes. Physicists were not interested in those microscopes because it was not of that much interest to physicists. Physicists were interested in atoms actually, because so these microscopes were not very useful to them. So then came 1931, and this is a great topic actually. It gave several Nobel Prizes actually, and in biology many, but in physics and chemistry, I think last year the new basically there was a Nobel Prize, or I think 2 years back or whatever, in cryo-TEM. So this gentleman, this physicist, invented electron microscope. So he was able to bombard electrons. You see this old-fashioned television screen, okay? So exactly the behind that there is an electron gun. So electron gun, what it does basically, it showers the electron, like your shower in your bathroom. So it basically sends the beam of electron. When it sends the beam of the electron, it basically passes through a matter, and then then you collect the electron from the other side, and through that you can see what is inside the matter. But sadly, I told you the problem of aberration. So the resolution was not enough. So resolution came down to around, let's say, 2-3 nanometer. Okay, so people could see viruses with this microscope, but they still could not see atoms. Okay, so problems still remain. So Okay, this microscope gave a new dimension to the structural biology. We started understanding, our understanding about inside the cell became very powerful. We started seeing organelles inside the cell. There is a cell nucleus and all kinds of proteins. We started seeing, you could see viruses now by this time. Okay, but atoms was still, it was still eluded actually from humans, because humans wanted to see, there was a theoretical word that, okay, indirectly you could see, okay, you can do the scattering experiment, Rutherford scattering, and people had indirect idea about atoms. It was not like the idea of atom was not there. Idea of atom was there, I told you that thousands of years back. But human curiosity is basically, they wanted to see atoms. I want to see atoms. I want to see. When you have this fascination, you have this dream in your mind, so then your story develops, actually, the story of science. Okay, so then this microscope was developed just after 15 years in India, also in Calcutta, this electron microscope. But as I told you that we have to look for new physics. How can we see atoms? So okay, so so now let us see. So this electron microscope, I will show you some pictures which will enlighten you, which will excite you, which will force you to think the world around you. So this electron microscope was not able to show atoms, but was able to show us different world which humans never saw. These are all fake color images. These are not real colors. Okay, so this is basically a plant of rosemary, and this is a picture of SEM, scanning electron microscope image of the leaf of that plant. You can see how beautiful it is, actually, how beautiful structure is there. So, and there's a lot of mathematics in these natural structures. Okay, I think you are aware of that, a lot of fractal structures and okay, so okay, let me not go into that area of mathematics, but there is beautiful mathematics into the structures, actually. So tree bark, actually, you can see magnified view of this simple tree bark here on right hand side, and this is some kind of root of some house plant, and you can see how beautiful it looks, like a brush kind of a thing. And then a lot of physics followed, actually. Then people started basically following that, what is going on, why these structures, can we make these kind of structures in laboratory? Then the branch of bio-inspired engineering came. Okay, can you make these structures? For example, some of these colors are not because of pigments, like a color in the there is a recent research that color in the crow, कौवे का जो color होता है इतना काला होता है. Okay, whether it is due to pigment or butterflies, black butterflies, so it is very dark object, or it is due to some arrangement of some, or it is due to some play of optics, actually. Okay, that is a different subject. I can give a talk there, like bio-inspired objects around us and what we learn, like what we learn from butterflies colors, peacocks color, lotus, and all kinds of things. We can discuss sometime later. So these are some of the structures. You can see the pollen grain under the microscope, which causes allergies. Okay, and this is the dust mite, which may crawl into your nose or ear when you sleep in the dust. So these are the tiny creatures which are crawling on you when you sleep. They cause a lot of allergies. Again, you can see that you should not be. Okay, this is the microscopic word. This is the louse on the head, which is okay, which is there, and then with an egg, actually. It's a very, this is the salt crystal under the microscope, and this is the strawberry. Okay, larger size. So I will tell you now a story of the birth of another microscope, which we call as the scanning tunneling microscope and atomic force microscope. I'll not go into the basic physics. I'll just tell you the story only. Okay, and that was the Nobel Prize of 1986. How this microscope developed. That's what I'm going to tell you. Not about the science part. Okay, because it become complicated for many. So from where this idea came from one brilliant teacher, Richard Feynman, actually. Feynman basically forced people to think. He gave challenges that is it possible to make a microscope so small that you can move atoms one day? You can make machines, motors from atoms, and you can make ultra density memory, which you see in these days computers, mobile phones, and camera memories. So this was not one of my favorite area. My own favorite area is basically computer memories. Maybe some other time, I think on previous platforms in your science center, I spoke about memories, but not today. So basically, he gave challenges that whether we can store and store, whether information, whether we can make quantum memories, qubits now you see. But for all these things, we need a better microscope. How can I move atoms if I cannot see the atoms where they are? So then this challenge was taken by two scientists of IBM, International Business Machine, in Europe, actually. So please remember that electron microscope was developed by this time, and it was late 70s, and that idea was growing actually. And then for this invention, 1986, these three people got Nobel Prize. 50% of the share was given to the inventor of electron microscope. Please remember that the structures which you saw just now, it was a derivative of transmission electron microscope, another brother of transmission electron microscope from the same family, which we call it scanning electron microscope, but from the same family. We don't need to go into the detail. Okay, and one-fourth share K was given to the people who were able to show first time the carbon atom, gold atom using scanning tunneling microscope. And later on, they realized the limitations of even so that proved actually that quantum mechanics, that was also proof of the quantum mechanics, quantum physics actually, this microscope. It's very interesting story actually, very interesting story. So then, these people were basically struggling to see, I hope you have, you know about superconductors. So they wanted to investigate superconductors, thin film, and they were grappling with those different kind of a microscope. They said, oh, we want to look at the resistivity at a finer detail. You know, when you do the resistive experiments, you take two electrode. For example, I want to do the resistivity measurement on this remote, AC remote. I'll put one electrode here, another electrode here, or two more electrodes here. Then I pass the current, and then the measure voltage, and I divide voltage by current, and I have the resistance. Then from resistance, I can calculate resistivity. Fine, but this gives me resistivity or resistance of entire this large area. So suppose I want to map the resistivity of this area and this area, this area. How do I do that? So for that, I need to make a tiny electrode, right? And then move this electrode. And there is one electrode here and another electrode here. Then I have to move this. If I want to measure the resistivity here, I tunnel the electrons, and then I know that this is conducting area, this is non-conducting area, this is conducting area. This, for example, in this remote, there is some conducting material inside, there is some non-conducting material. If you look at your mobile phone, okay, there are you know, the circuit is there. In circuits there are some transistor, diodes, and there are semiconductors, there is a metal, there is a dielectric. So all these three things are there. There is a magnetic material. So they wanted to investigate superconductors. Okay, for that they needed a microscope, and they basically ended up inventing what we call scanning tunneling microscope. So there is scanning and tunneling electrons. So electron tunneling is basically in quantum physics. You will learn in your undergraduate course. So you already, I think you are already excited to go to the undergraduate courses because you want to know what is quantum mechanics. And this was basically amazing quantum world. And it was so amazing. They lost the sleep. It was a news in entire world that, oh, they have shown the atomic surfaces actually. That was a birth of the STM at IBM Zurich. It was in Switzerland, Zurich. And I remember there was one Rajesh Khanna movie, and he goes to Zurich as a scientist, nuclear scientist actually. I don't remember the name of that movie. So they 1979 they filed first patent, and world was like watching in awe, and they were given Nobel Prize just after 6 years. Normally Nobel Prize you have to wait for until a person is very very old in 80s 90s they get Nobel Prize. So this invention was so important, please trust me, that it was rare that they got Nobel Prize almost 5 6 years, because people realize the potential that this world is going to change the way we look the world around us, the matter. Again, please remember the merger of mind and matter. The finest mind is able to invent. Once you have quietened the mind waves, then only you can focus. Without the earlier studies, these things, everybody has their own ways. Probably they had their own ways. Not they didn't read those things, but everybody have their own books actually, which they use. But finally, okay, so that was a realization of the dream of Richard Feynman, that from STM they were able to move the atoms. I'm telling you that IBM took this challenge. Yes, so then they could take, they from this needle, they could take it, and then they could move it around. They formed something called quantum corral actually. That there is a area which is used to confined area to tie horses, to confine horses actually. So that is called actually corral actually, and then they made something like this. So this is kept in the Science Museum, London, the first these generations of this microscope. So you happen to be in London, so you must go to the Science Museum, and then you should see those things. So this was the first image. You can see these ripples. These ripples are nothing but the silicon atoms basically, and okay, so then more and more information came. This was struck. This was the first picture of carbon atom. So this was basically based on scanning, tunneling the current. So there was a limitation of this microscope. What was the limitation? That if you are trying to image something, that has to pass the current, and only if your object is metallic, then only you can pass the current. Otherwise you cannot pass the current, right? You cannot pass the current. So that means you could see the atoms only of the objects which are metallic in nature, okay, which can conduct the electricity. What about plastic? Can you see the atoms of plastic, or a glass, or your this mobile phone, which is also the cover plastic? And then this guy was traveling to US. He took a leave actually, and then he was traveling to US, and वो बोलते हैं ना कि कोई बोलते हैं ना कि हमारे यहाँ भी आ जाओ, हमारा भी बना दो, हमारा भी बना दो. तो उस टाइप का कुछ सीन हुआ होगा. मुझे लगता है कि then he went to Stanford actually. Then Stanford University, and IBM has got its own research center, IBM Almadin Research Center. And then he had more time to think. There, he says that he had more time to think. Now, please remember the function of brain, because his mind waves were quietened. He had more time to focus, think. Then came another invention immediately within a few years, atomic force microscope. Okay, and he was looking at the ceiling. He was lying in his apartment. No disturbance, no phone call, no Facebook, no WhatsApp, nothing. Okay, no friends, no family, nothing, because he was in another country. So no baggage, nothing. So then he had time to think, and he was staring at ceiling, and then he found that, why I can't see the roughness of this ceiling? Because it's conducting. My microscope should be able to see this atoms of this ceiling. That he took the challenge. Then he discussed with two other scientists, Christopher Gerber and Calvin Quate, and then they all did some calculations, and then they reached to the idea that yes, you can make something like a cantilever. Okay, I'll just stop sharing, and I'll tell you what exactly is the this idea of cantilever. So I have a cantilever kind of a thing in my hand. So you can see this is like a cantilever. Okay, so when you have to understand the forces actually, how strongly you can apply so how can you feel the forces actually of any tip and the sample? So they started doing this calculation, and then this calculation basically told them that they can indeed make a macroscope out of that. So that was basically birth of the macroscope, okay, at IBM. And now I go to another very important part about, I'll teach you the last part, I'll teach you. So this is basically, you can see this is another image of, atomic level. I think this is again carbon atom, this graphite. So now I will teach you the last part, maybe 5-10 minutes, if you allow me. Govinda, can I continue for 5-10 minutes?
Yes, sir. For 5 minutes, you can.
5 minutes, okay. So I'll teach you that how this so basically, to develop this atomic force microscope, we needed some understanding of forces. Okay, so so we know that so forces are of many kinds. We study in the school. I don't know whether you know about Boyle's law. Boyle's basically gave Gauss law, PV is equal to nRT, but that law was faulty because there was no intermolecular interaction. So then came van der Waals, and I will not share the slides, and I will just speak to you without slides so that I can finish it faster. With the slides, I'll take more time. So, so this idea of forces came under a lot of investigation. So, what is the glue which is holding these atoms together? So, have you ever wondered what basically holds these atoms together? What kind of a bonding is taking place between different kinds of atoms? What is that actually? What controls our height? What controls our thoughts and emotions? Basically, this is how the thoughts are formed. These are all dance of charges, basically. So fundamentally, either it is electrostatic force or gravitational force, which with these two forces which controls our height, our thoughts, by migration, the food digestion, and all the objects around that around us, they're all controlled by these fundamental forces. So forces are you can just classify them into two parts: attractive force and repulsive force. So then came one scientist, actually, his name was van der Waals. He said that the forces between two atoms is attractive in nature. And Newton also, many students are watching me on Facebook, and I request you to, now I'm towards the end of the lecture, 5 minutes. So I request all of you to text all your questions, on your Facebook Live. And Professor Lakhotia promised me that he will take some of the best questions, and those best questions will reach to me. And don't forget your exercises, mental exercises, and all kinds of things, okay, which I have given to you. So now I will tell you that about the science of lizards. You might be wondering that how lizards, house lizard, jo makhiyan aur machhar khate hain, so how can they climb on very rough surfaces, vertical surfaces, all kinds of surfaces? Okay, so what is the science behind that? So this science is basically van der Waals force. So van der Waals force at the smaller level becomes so strong that these gecko lizards, they can climb on any vertical surfaces. So this is called biomechanics, or okay. So they're basically lizards' feet. If you look at under microscope, which we already have now, so you will realize that if you zoom, actually keep on zooming to nanometer, you will find that they are like brush kind of structures. Okay, and this brush kind of structure, the van der Waals interaction collectively becomes so strong that they can. You might have seen the Spider-Man movies. So what is the science of Spider-Man? Can you make some dresses or gloves for our soldiers? So they have to climb the mountains, hills in Leh Ladakh. So they can't mimic obviously Spider-Man, but at least some load is lessened actually. So they don't find that much of difficulty. So US Army is also learning from these ideas that can we use van der Waals forces to make some glueless. Normally you use glue to stick one object to another object, but another examples I want to give you from your home of van der Waals forces, very strong van der Waals forces, is basically also basically some there is some suction force involved because there is some vacuum, that you might have seen that in the kitchen actually, two basically very smooth surfaces, they stick to each other, and then metallic objects actually, or two glass plates, and you have to try hard to separate them. So you have to answer to your teacher what is how you explain two smooth surfaces sticking to each other. That's the next question. And the next question I would like to give you, that the river delta formation. So what is the science of river delta formation? When the sweet water from the rivers merges to the ocean, right? You go into the Ganga Sagar, the Sundarban Delta, or you go to anywhere near Goa. So immediately when the sand which is floating in the river water, when it merges with the salty water, immediately that entire sand basically get collected, accumulated. For example, there is some initially there was repulsion into those sand particles, so they were dispersed into the water. That means there was some electrostatic repulsion, and when they merge with the sea water, where there is a lot of sodium ions, the positive ions, so then suddenly there is some kind of charge neutralization happens. Then van der Waals forces come into the picture. Then entire sand start forming like a delta. Okay, so and next question comes that why do you add sometimes salt into when you boil eggs? So what is the physics of that, of putting salt? What is the advantage of that? So that is also another exercise which I would like to give you. One more exercise. Okay, I think that is enough for today. So basically, and then last concept I want to give you, that if you just close your eyes and hold one of your hand to another hand, and just think at finer level, quite in your mind, and just think the physics of what is the meaning of touch. So you may find it very trivial that, oh, my hand is touching with this hand. So what is the physics of touching? How do I know that this hand is touching to this hand? So why don't this top layer of atoms of top layer of this hand and atoms of top layer of this hand, they are basically interacting with each other. Okay, normally these are some cells, and after that on cells, that these are lipids and some kind of receptors are there. Forget about the biology part. Let us come. Finally, they are basically, there is some charge here, there is some charge here, negative charge. So you have to look at the electron orbital colliding, and that was basically Pauli exclusion principle. So you have to read about Pauli exclusion principle and repulsive force, basically, that at what level. So contact between two objects is basically finest demonstration of real life demonstration of Pauli exclusion principle, that these cannot just merge. These two, they have to stop. Actually. That means there is some repulsive force somewhere, and if I'm just pressing it hard, that means that I have to just deform this. Actually, suppose I take this object, pen, and I try to press this. So why these atoms of this hand are getting pushed downwards? That means there is some limit. You can push atoms. You can just atoms can't go closer to each other. That's why this surface get pushed, because this is softer, this is harder. Had it been softer, then this surface will get pushed. So that is basically another important force which we call repulsive force, which kicked in at very smaller dimensions, sub-angstrom dimensions, less than 1 angstrom. So basically entire our universe is fine balance of these attractive and repulsive forces. And that's what people understood from thousands of years, that everything can be categorized into attractive. And so I end with one sutra which I learned in my school, and I want to share my gurus, my teacher till in my till 8th standard. When I was in 2nd standard, 3rd standard, every day we used to read, and it will help you probably. You can accept it or you can reject it. It's up to you. But it's very ancient formula for students. How do we success? How to be successful? There are 5 things: Kaka chesta, Vakodhyanam, Swana nidra, Tathevacha, Alpahari grahatyagi, Vidyarthi panchalakshanam. So Kaka chesta, you have to, your intention should be like a crow, that you jump on the opportunity, right opportunity. That's number 1. Vakodhyanam. So your meditation, your attention, your focus should be like a bagule jaisa. Basically that when you see the fish, your focus is on the on right object. What is important? You're not distracted by what is not important in the lake. What is important for you. You should be focused on that. Ignore all other distractions. That is second. Second, you have to find the applications of this. Swana nidra. Basically, your sleep should be like a dog, that you are alert. Actually, you don't require too much of sleep. That can happen only when you rest, you mentally rest. Now you don't agitate your mind in daytime. Alpahari, when you are basically, you don't eat, you don't stuff too much food, then your sleep will be like a dog, because if you have balance in the food, okay, then you grahatyagi, you cannot practice grahatyag. Actually, you can't leave home, because earlier students used to go to Gurukula, but now we don't have Gurukul. But at least living in home, you don't get too much into those homely activities. Then only you can focus all your energies into what you want to achieve. And with this, I want to thank the organizers, Bajaj Science Center, Professor Lakotia, that he gave me this opportunity. And please ask plenty of questions, online, offline. I'm here in Pune. I'm accessible on phone, email. Thank you very much. Over to Govind. I can't hear you, Govind.
Thank you very much, sir, for this excellent talk. And this was the perfect beginning which we were all looking for. Thank you for this excellent stories on mind and microscopes. I also wish to express my gratitude to you for providing encouragement to feed the curiosity for knowing more and more about the things. We all are inspired by your great words, and we are excited to move ahead with the series. Let us take few questions from the kids. We have got more than 450 comments on our Facebook pages, but not all related with the science or questions. Right. So I think more than 500 students followed you for this lecture. So this is a good start. And let us take few questions. I can see something. First question is from Vanshika Agrawal. If electron microscopes can't see colors, then how do we know about the green color of chlorophyll?
What is color actually? Color is a fake sense of, there is, in physics, there is nothing as color. Color is just a wavelength of, wave of certain wavelength. So color is basically manufactured in our brain. Chlorophyll doesn't have green color. It is basically our brain tells us that this has got certain color. Sugar is not sweet. The sweetness is in our brain. It is basically, it came from evolution. We started seeing, we named it as a chlorophyll, as a green color. Chlorophyll is okay. So first you have to understand that chlorophyll is, this color is an illusion, mental illusion. Now coming back to that, so electron microscope, no microscope sees the color. It sees basically waves, the presence, or either optical waves or presence of atoms when you bombard the electrons. So the colors which I showed you, they were fake color. They were just artistic color. They were put later on in the images. So image which is produced by electron microscope is basically electron amplitude, basically how many electrons, number of electron intensity, basically. Okay, so how many electrons are there at particular place, and so somewhere there are less electrons, somewhere there are more electrons. So you see the area where you see more electrons. So basically more electrons, basically you can see that the area basically light up more. Like you can see the dark sky in the night sky. Basically you see the stars. So rest of the area is dark, but there are some stars which are lighting up. So you can see electron microscope image exactly like that. So wherever electrons are able to transmit, those areas will light up, and that will look lighter in contrast. And wherever the electrons are stopped, those areas will look darker. So basically, it's a gray scale. So because you know from other information that okay, this is green color from your day-to-day experience. So because see, you have to link mind and matter. So this color basically fakeness helps you to visualize, actually connect between illusion of mind and the matter. And so microscope doesn't tell you. Okay, you got it. Next question, probably.
Yes, sir. Now we are taking few questions from Facebook. Priya Sarda has asked, sir, what is mean by topography?
Topography is basically, for example, you take a walk into your city, you go to different streets and different terrain, and then you find that certain places are higher in the height, and some of them are descending. So when you so that is your common perception that, for example, this remote is having this kind of a topography. Basically, this is some kind of a structure, but this is visible to our eyes. But when you go to the atomic level, when you want to see certain atoms and terraces, some bilayer and two layers of atoms. So then okay, and like for example, this virus looks this big. So that is called topography. Is basically when you look at the topology of the surface structure of the essentially surface structure of matter. The arrangement of atoms is called topography, actually. When you start measuring it, basically, when you make graph out of that, graphy is basically, you can surface measurement, actually. Okay, surface feature measurement is called topography. Okay.
Okay, sir. Next question is from Gajanan Kharabe. Sir, can the brain grow more?
Well, why do you want brain to grow more? I would say that first, follow these books and start using this brain more efficiently. Probably, see, evolution takes. Now, let us come to the serious scientific part, that brain evolution happens over millions of years. So, brain might be evolving. We do not know, because with that length, that time scale is too long. So and we only just last in 10-15 years, we had machines that could, that microscopes, actually, what we call it, MRI, okay, magnetic resonance imaging, that brain imaging tools were so high resolution that we started seeing high resolution images of brain. And then when you collect, see, but it's not possible. See, I need to have a reference point, that your question, that is it possible to evolve the brain? So I need to have a reference point, some brain image of that year, and then thousands of years ahead. Then I can do the relative measurements to see the evolution of brain. But I would say that everything is changing, brain is changing, everything is evolving. But not in next 1,000 generation, you will see a significant change in the brain, because evolution takes long time. So don't even hope for that. Even if it is happening, it won't happen in your lifetime. Okay, so let us use whatever we have. Yeah.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Next question is from 8th standard student Krishna. Sir, how can we see neutron, proton, and electron? Which microscope can be used? And what is its story?
Okay, good. So you want to see, first we have to divide these particles into two parts. Okay, charged particles and the particles which are not charged. For example, if you take electrons and protons, they are charged particles, and neutrons are not charged particles. So for example, I will take you back to the famous Rutherford backscattering experiment, where alpha particles were bombarded on atoms, and to their surprise, they were expecting that all the alpha particles will get transmitted to the other side on the screen. But many of those alpha particles they turned back. So alpha particles are positively charged. So what scientists they do, for example, positively charged particle, if you're bombarding on atoms and they are coming back, so they know that there is a strong repulsion, so that means there is other Coulombian repulsion. So that means there is some very powerful positive charges present. So that gives the idea of a nucleus where you have neutrons and protons in a very tiny confined area. So that was basically a indirect evidence that yes, there is a basically electrons. And if you want to see electrons, it is easy. You see it on the television screen. So you basically heat a metal like copper, and in vacuum condition, so you heat it that much that electrons start ejecting. Okay, electrons start coming. When you heat it, then you will have electrons out, or you apply some electric force. Basically, once you have electrons out, then you take a phosphor screen. Okay, you basically shower those screens on a phosphor screen, and then you see the electrons right there. Your old-fashioned television was nothing but you were looking at the electrons essentially, actually. Okay, the old-fashioned screens, television screens, the bade wale, you were actually looking at. So charged particles you can see very easily. Okay, so it is possible. So in electron microscope, nowadays we don't use those phosphor screen. We use basically diode-based detector to detect the presence of electrons. It's a very interesting question, by the way, from the 8th standard. Actually, it's very high-level thinking. I admire this particular student that they are thinking in that direction.
Yes, sir. Next question is again from 8th standard student. What could be the maximum capacity of brain to store data?
Well, brain is not like a computer memory. Please understand that. Brain is not a static memory storage unit. You might notice from your day-to-day experiences that you read something yesterday and you forget it today. So brain is a very dynamic, stochastic processes, very non-linear processes which are happening. So it is the brain cannot be compared. So brain basically start forming new circuits every moment. The old circuits are breaking. So it should not be done at all to compare. You cannot quantify at any moment what can be stored and what cannot be stored. If somebody is doing that, the old-fashioned scientists used to, they had an attempt to calculate the storage of the brain. But modern scientists today, as of today, I told you that this is not done. This should not be done, because these two things are, you cannot quantify the brain storage. It is impossible, because it's a very non-linear, very dynamic system. Actually, it's a very dynamic system. Actually, it's changing all the time. So how will you know that maybe I have certain memory storage capacity today, maybe tomorrow I have something else? So it basically changes with your environment, food you're eating, and your sleep, how much you sleep. Okay, and how much herbs you are taking, how much yoga you are doing, how much breathing you are doing, pranayama. So that affects every day. That affects. So nobody knows the optimum level of memory. And please, last thing I would like to warn you that memory is not just in the brain; it is all over the body. For example, suppose you had an knee injury 2 years back. You may have forgotten, but your brain, your body doesn't forget. Suppose somebody eats some toxic material probably several years back, but your brain doesn't remember. You don't have any memory here, but your body remembers. So your body entire cell has got a memory mechanism. Your each cell has got a memory. Please note that. Memory is not just here, human memory. Okay, it's everywhere, everywhere. Suppose you go to sunlight and your skin get tanned. That means skin remembers that you went to the sunlight to the beach 10 days back. That is also memory. So what you define as a memory, your first definition of a memory has to change. So don't compare it with the computer memory, please. Okay. First, you define what is human memory. Yeah, thank you.
Wow, what a reply. Next question is from 9th standard student, Ojas. What is this quantum physics? What kind of topics they will go through this?
Basically, one of the finest, I'm fascinated by few things or more of quantum physics. One is, everybody is fascinated, obviously. One is basically this de Broglie's concept of existence of duality, basically wave and particle nature. So that this is amazing. This is seen in electron microscope all the time, that certain things, certain experiments we can understand only by the wave nature, and others we can understand by the particle nature. Okay, so that is one of the gift of quantum mechanics. Another is basically uncertainty principle, basically, and it is so much visible into experiments when we do at the extreme time scale and length scales. When we try to increase the temporal resolution, basically the energy resolution becomes worse and worse. So delta T multiplied by delta E, and then that has got an uncertainty, basically Planck constant divided by 2, basically. So those things, when you come to a lab like this, National Chemical Laboratory, when you go into the experimental physics laboratory, then you basically you see the real life examples of quantum mechanics happening all the time, actually. Otherwise, first you have to read theory. I'm sorry for that. You have to undergo the boring theory, but the boringness becomes so interesting when you connect with the experiments, actually. I'm sure your teachers will do justice to basically teach you in quantum mechanics in right way. I would love to do that at any time, teach you quantum mechanics in a very practical way. Thank you.
There are many questions on Facebook, sir, but I think we should stop here. Let us take the feedback of one of the student of our institute, Bajaj Science Center. So I would like to invite Anjali Mishra from 9th standard. Yes, Anjali.
Yes, sir. Am I audible?
Yes, Anjali.
Yes, Anjali.
Yeah. Yeah. A very good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, Anjali.
Sir, it was really our pleasure to hear you, and the session was very amazing. So on behalf of all of us, I extend a very big thank to you to take out time from your busy schedule and engage us, and for such a knowledgeable session, and I request you to please come with such more sessions, and thank you so much, sir.
Sure, Anjali, I will try my best to talk to you more often in this lockdown, and I hope it was beneficial for you. Mind and matter, both subjects are very important. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Pankaj sir, for your time. You are always available for Bajaj Science Center. Earlier also, you joined us for many sessions for different topics. Thank you very much So from the desk of Bajaj Science Center, we will remain thankful to you, and we would like to connect you again and again in future. So I'm thankful to all students, teachers who have joined this session and made this session live. So this is very exciting, and we are eagerly waiting for the next session. Same day, same time, same channel. Thank you very much. So with this, we would like to end this session with your permission. Thank you.